Howdy, ladies and gentlemen. We have a social democrat that would like to have a brief discussion dash debate with me here, Mr. Interstellar Space Jew. This is being hosted in the MK Ultra server for all of you interested. It's a community of people that come together to talk about both conspiracies and wider socio-political affairs. So, the first point of information that I would like to pose to you, sir, is what is your perspective on the vilification of white in group preference uh, as compared to Jewish in group preference that is not vilified?
I don't think it's a problem outside of the mainstream media.
But the mainstream media is a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Yeah, so I guess if I would expand on that, I would say that I don't think that the average person really thinks about that on a day-to-day basis. It seems that it is only something that is ever talked about by people on television.
Right. And how many people do the people on television get to influence? Millions, no? This
I'm
seems
not
like an attempt to dismiss the amount of wealth and influence that the media has in warping public opinion.
I believe that the public media can influence um, people's opinions, absolutely. I'm just not sure on this particular topic whether or not they've had any real influence. Do I think there are people that run around like crazy idiots going, the white man is to blame for everything? Yeah, I think they're out there. And I think for the most part, the average person collectively thinks they are fools, as do I.
Right. I'm glad to hear that. Just out of curiosity, so you would condemn the likes of Salon writing anti-white bigoted articles in a heartbeat, yes?
Most likely,
Because
yes. I
because a
generally
few years
prefer,
ago, sorry, go ahead.
I generally like to read the article in total, which is something most people don't do prior to condemnation. But if it would be something that starts out and ends with the idea that the issues of the world can be laid squarely at the feet of the white man, then yes, I would absolutely condemn that as nonsense.
Excellent. So let's see. The problem is that the idea of white in-group preference wasn't around, let's say 4 to 6 years ago, as much as it is now, and the people that have caused that are the New York Times and Salon article writers. Rural America is lacking in diversity and needs to be culturally enriched with migration, an article that was published recently. Um, this kind of blatant Loxism or anti white male bigotry is causing the rise of the actual far right. Would you acknowledge that the far left, intelligentsia, and thought leaders have a role to play in the rise of far right and extremist views because they target whiteness, they target being a man with the whole incel bollocks that goes around the internet, as well as many, many other things. Do they have,
Yeah, I would agree to that. I would
right,
say that we have a phrase that we learned in the sixth grade. For every action, there is an equal and opposing reaction. So if you have a radical on the left screaming about something, that is going to cause a radical person on the right to scream back at them. I
indeed.
personally just dismiss both positions and try to figure out what's actually going on.
I hear you. So, what is the general perspective that you've had concerning the differences between the center right and the far right so far? And I'm asking because I'd like to see if they match up with how we see things on the center right. I speak on that what's it called, representing
So
such a standard.
I do know that there's a difference in the way we talk about right and left in Europe and the way we talk about right and left in America. So I
Hmm.
believe center left in America would be considered center right in Europe. if I understand that correctly. I don't know too much about the European divide as far as the right left shift goes. I
As
can
it
speak
stands
about in
presently,
America.
both in Europe and America, the intersectional globalist progressive left are cut from the same block and are enacting the exact same policies. Climate hysteria and Green New Deals, open borders policies, progressive taxation with socialism and socialist agendas, and intersectional globalist ideology are common facets of both the American and the European leftist political movements.
So when I think of the center right in America, I think of the old Rockefeller Republicans. When I think about the far right in America, I think about evangelical. Um, I don't really consider there to be a far right economic agenda in America, as anything that a mainstream party would proffer. So when I
Let
look
me
at the right, I
briefly let me
okay.
briefly preface something. The primary difference between center right and far right is that the far right want racial hegemony, and the center right simply want closed borders and control of demographic declines of populations. Um, would you
I
acknowledge
think I
this?
would agree. I think I would agree with that maybe in Europe. I'm not sure if I would agree with that as much in America. I'm not going to say that racial hegemony doesn't, there aren't people that want that in America, but I don't think it's the driving factor of what I would consider the far right in America. I think the driving factor, as far as I can tell in America, of what I would consider the far right is more of a Christian revival, more so than a racial
I see.
divide.
Would you agree that Christianity is particularly heavily under attack both in the media and across digital platform channels to an extent? Like, we have churches burning every week in Europe by Mohammedans. Christianity, as far as I can tell, is the most persecuted religion worldwide presently. And what makes Christianity, by the way, quote, far right? Like, what do you mean Christian fundamentalist, the Westboro Baptist variety?
When I think, well, let me answer the first question first. I agree with you that Christianity is certainly a religion that is attacked in the mainstream media. I would absolutely agree with that. There aren't many church burnings here in America. The Muslim population of America is very, very peaceful. Um, but then again, we don't have the amount of first generation immigrants you guys have. Um, as far as what I call the far Christian right, um, are people who would prefer that our laws reflect biblical um, biblical norms as opposed to secular norms. So, no abortion, certain sexual things be outlawed, certain social things be outlawed, preference of men working and women in the home, um, Bible study taught in public schools alongside and as an opposing view to evolution. That is what I see the far right in America wanting.
Right, I see. Would you acknowledge that the Richard Spencer variety of the alt-right that openly promotes National Socialism, or Nazism for short, can be clearly defined as the kind of quote far right that you and the world should not want to be associated with, specifically because a commonality that both the far left and the far right share is a distinct love for authoritarianism? Any at the moment that they wish to restrict freedom of speech on the far right because Jewish subversion is going to happen and we can't handle it unless we shut down freedom of speech. And then you have the alt left tech alliance, Twitter saying that we're not going to permit political ads, and then Facebook saying, oh, we're pro freedom of speech, yet obviously not for anyone who is not, who is to the right of Mao, will have experienced. Would you agree that authoritarianism is a common trait, feature, aspect, attribute of both the far left and the far right, sir?
Yes,
Excellent. Let's see. Do you oppose the current sitting president, and do you believe that he should be impeached?
yes.
Right. Can you explain to me why that is?
I believe in the rule of law. I believe that the president is not above the law. I believe that the president should be held the most accountable of any US citizen for his actions. And I believe it has been demonstrated to me that the president of the United States has violated the law. And therefore, he should
In
be
what
removed
way,
from
sir?
office. It has been shown to me, it is a belief that I hold. When I say belief, I mean that it is something that I hold to be true that has met an
Yes. What is
internal
the
criteria
evidence
of
that he has
evidence.
broken the law, sir? Like, what is the
So
accusation?
I agree. I agree with the findings in the Mueller report that the president of the United States has obstructed justice. I'm not. I cannot comment on the Ukraine call as no information has been presented in public. So I cannot comment on that.
Right. So after three
But I
years of the Russian conspiracy, you think that they wouldn't have thrown something at him if they had anything of substance? You believe that the Mueller report is sufficient evidence that he is criminally culpable in Russian collusion, sir?
no. I do not believe that Donald Trump is culpable in Russian collusion.
Do you believe that he
I
rigged the election with the help of the Russians?
no
Right, so what is his criminal activity concerning the Mueller report, specifically?
obstruction of justice.
Right. Do you know what a deep state is?
I have a brief understanding of the use of that word, but
Right.
you
I
may
want to
want
be
to
very
better explain
specific.
your.
Yes, I want to be very specific to verify and substantiate the definition of what a deep state is. The five primary sources of income for the deep state are oil, arms trafficking, human slave trafficking, opioid production and distribution and sales, and oil. Um, Shadow governments, certain institutions that use mercenary groups to spill the blood of fathers, brothers, and sons for a tidy profit. The Obama administration and the Bush administration's doings done in both Libya and in Afghanistan and the Middle East resulted in the escalation of the drug war, specifically because the CIA was mass producing heroin and shipping it over to America with planes across the Mexican border. Do you understand the drug trafficking and human trafficking and arms trafficking and yada yada scale of these criminal activities? You can surely acknowledge that there are embedded deep state elements in the government that partake in these
If you're
activities.
asking me, if you're asking me if I think, say, for instance, the CIA takes part in the sale and distribution of drugs, yes, I do. If
Right.
you're asking me if
Excellent.
I think that the CIA, along with MI6 and European intelligence, takes part in the selling of weapons, small arms, and sometimes large arms to foreign governments and militia groups in order to further an agenda, yes, I do.
Excellent. So I want to briefly get back to the point of you said that you
One thing that
value
I'm
the
not
rule of
sure I'm
law.
willing
Yeah.
to, if I may pause real quick, I'm not sure that I would agree that these government entities take part in human trafficking. That's probably where I would draw the line. I've never seen any evidence to that, but if evidence were presented to me, I would certainly look over it.
Obama providing logistical and financial support to Al Qaeda that then turned into ISIS and had ongoing human trafficking. That is
Well, that
specifically
wasn't
what.
Obama.
Yes, it was. Obama provided logistical and financial support to Al Qaeda that then molded into ISIS. I can find you the video where he admits it
You're
on
talking about in Syria. Okay.
Yes, I'm talking about the overthrow of Gaddafi using Al Qaeda, arming them, providing them with logistical support, and then those groups turning into ISIS.
Okay, I can't really speak on that.
Right. Let me briefly, just a second.
Hey everybody, it's Jake.
Right. So you mentioned earlier that you value the rule of law above all else, right? That this is a
Uh,
fundamental core principle that we all ought to abide by, yes?
I mean, I don't know if I would say, and if I did, let me recant. I don't know if I hold the rule of law above all else, um, but it's certainly one of the things that I hold as a
Excellent.
foundational
So
axiom.
I'm curious, how do you feel about Mueller being involved in letting Epstein off the hook for trafficking and raping children on an industrial scale?
I'm unaware of any involvement that the Mueller
Oh,
investigation into
you've never
Trump had
looked into
on Jeffrey Epstein.
Mueller giving a light sentence to Epstein, sir, and his involvement in such.
I am unaware of Robert Mueller having anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein.
I see. I'll find some links for you. Hold up.
As far as I understand, the sentence was carried out in Florida by a assistant district attorney. Robert Mueller is a federal prosecutor. Um, I am under no understanding that Jeffrey Epstein's state case in Florida would have risen to
As I've said
a
before, this aspect.
federal legal violation that would have brought Robert Mueller into it.
I'll find it, Phil. I'll find you the relevant information, sir. Give me a brief moment.
By the way, I checked the back chat, and it says that I do not have permission to read the back chat. So if anybody's typing in there, I can't see it. Does anybody know when Robert Mueller received his sentence? His first sentence? I don't remember. But I do know that Robert Mueller was the Deputy Attorney General for George W. Bush for about 5 months. Prior to that, he was the United States Attorney for the Northern District of California. And prior to that, he was the Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division under George H.W. Bush. And prior to that, he worked in Massachusetts. Um, and then, of course, he was the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation for 12 years.
Right,
None of
right, you are.
those positions would have had any interaction with Jeffrey Epstein's cases in the state courts of Florida.
This here is evidence of an open cover-up of the Epstein case by the FBI. As I mentioned prior, there are embedded deep state agents in the American both police forces, politics, academia, etc. These people cover up other people that are involved in blackmail and entrapment schemes involving the trafficking and rape of children. And you trust Mueller and the FBI to be the proper, due diligent arbiters of what is lawful or what is proper under the rule of law. You see the impeachment investigation as something that has legitimacy, whereas my side, for the most part, views it as a globalist deep state scam using the deep state as using deep state operatives,
So
specifically Mueller.
I would not say that I trust my government. I would not say that I trust the FBI. That would be a strong word. Do I believe that the FBI acts in the best, out of accordance with, the general welfare of the United States population?
Right.
Yes.
So I'm curious. So you do acknowledge that there's a possibility of partisan hack jobbery when it comes to Trump? The illegal spying, for example.
I'm unaware that I'm unaware of any um, evidence that supports the accusation of spying on Donald Trump.
Let me send you the evidence that the MI6 British intelligence agency, Theresa May and the Queen, as well as the Democrat filth, signed off on the illegal spying of the Trump campaign. I'll find you the link in just a second. I'm guessing that you don't come across.
Where are you putting these, by the way?
These are in the debate channel.
Okay, I see
Text
now.
channel.
I see now. While you're looking for that, I'm just going to peruse this link about it you gave.
So the title of this is Sidney Powell drops bombshell showing how the FBI trapped Michael Flynn. It goes into how the upper echelon of the FBI met to orchestrate it all. So there is definitive evidence of partisan deep state hack jobbery against the sitting president, which is high treason, and the proportionate response to high treason is execution. Your thoughts concerning this?
Well, I don't support capital punishment in any way, shape, or form. If someone committed high treason, they deserve to spend the rest of their natural-born life in a federal. However, one person committing high treason or a group of high people committing high treason against the United States does not excuse criminal activity by the President of the United States.
Conducted?
Obstruction of justice.
By the deep state. Is there any justice in the deep state's methods?
So, according to the Mueller report, which I have faith in, Donald Trump committed at least 9 acts of obstruction of justice. And as was true in the Nixon case, it is generally not the initial crime or non-crime.
How did he obstruct it, sir? After millions of dollars spent, after all the manpower that he could require, after the deep state's 3 years of investigating the Russia bullshit, after 3 years, they couldn't come up with anything, nothing, other than, quote, obstruction of justice as a clinging, hang-on aspersion. It doesn't convince me, especially when the actors involved are partisan hack jobs.
Interestingly enough, the Mueller investigation actually made a profit. It actually didn't cost the American taxpayer a penny. It actually walked away with several $1 million in profit. To determine obstruction of justice, something must meet 3 criteria under the United States Federal Legal Code, which is an obstructive act, which is defined by the United States government as anything that blocks or makes difficult or hinders an investigation. There must be corrupt intent, which is defined as knowing that they were acting improperly or with an improper motive. And finally, a nexus to obstruct an official proceeding, which is defined as knowing that there was an active investigation or court case when the obstruction occurred.
What are these 9 cases, by the way, of obstruction? I'm curious.
Right, so these cases are as follows. In the Mueller report, Robert Mueller identifies Donald Trump asking Comey to let the investigation of Michael Flynn go.
Yeah, because it was a partisan hack job, as seen in the link that I provided.
In this instance, there was obstruction, intent, and nexus to an official proceeding.
No, that was high treason on the part of the deep state, sir, as seen in the link that I provided. Coordinated by MI6 and the British intelligence agency. Signed off by Theresa May and the Queen.
So the next one that meets this criteria is the fire.
Is bullshit. So hold on, before we move on to the second one. So the first one, with the Michael Flynn case, there was an international act of war by the British intelligence agency to monitor and to get Mr. Michael Flynn in the shit over nothing. Michael Flynn is an
So
innocent man who has been persecuted by partisan deep state hack jobs. So the
the
first one is
problem,
bullshit.
the, well, the problem here is that regardless of whether or not
No,
the British,
I want you
well,
to
if I may allow, if you may
go
allow
ahead,
me,
sir.
um, regardless of whether, again, another entity commits a crime, does not excuse another person from committing a
How can
crime.
you
Since we,
obstruct? I bless Trump for obstructing an act of war from Britain in the Michael Flynn case. He did the right thing. It wasn't obstruction of justice. It was thwarting an act of war from the British intelligence
well,
agencies and the deep state.
What Donald Trump did was request that James Comey drop the United States investigation of Michael Flynn as to his
Because it was a
participation.
partisan deep state hack job against an innocent man with a family.
Well, many people have family.
Yes, of course, but the point is that the man is innocent of, quote, lying to the FBI because they stitched him up, and it was a deep state partisan hack job, not a case of obstruction of justice. In the real world, the deep state exists. It has operatives. It has people who try to destroy people's lives. And God bless the president for standing by an innocent man, Michael Flynn.
Well, I can't really respond to that. So we'll just move
Other
on to
than the
the next
facts
one.
of the affair, other than the facts of the real world, that with the Michael Flynn case, it was deep state British MI6 conducting an act of war against a sitting president,
Well,
trying to interfere in American politics. It is not obstruction of
unfortunately,
justice to
I
thwart an act of war by a foreign
unfortunately,
intelligence agency.
unfortunately, I cannot comment on that
You
as I
can't
have not
comment
been
on it,
presented.
but you should read what I have posted on it,
Well,
because the
I
facts.
plan on reading everything you post, although I will say I did click on the Times article, and unfortunately, I do not have a subscription to the London Times or whatever that is, so I can only read about a paragraph and a half.
You can go to an
Um,
archive.is of it, don't worry.
I will find it. So the next one is the firing of James Comey.
As is the right of
The
every president to remove the FBI, just like Bill Clinton did.
So it is true that all people in the government serve at the pleasure of the President of the United States of America that are part of the federal branch, the executive branch. I'm sorry. However, the reason that the firing of James Comey rises to the level of obstruction is due to the fact that at the time of the firing, Comey was involved in several investigations, both for and against Donald Trump.
Is James
The Mueller
Comey a
report
legitimate prosecutor? Are his
is
investigations into the
James
Russian
Comey was
conspiracy
James
legitimate?
Comey is not a prosecutor. He was the director of the FBI.
Yes. Do you believe that the FBI has deep state entrenched operatives? Yes or no?
I can't comment on that.
Why
I
not?
don't know because I don't know.
Well, based on everything that you've seen so far, would you say yes or no that the deep state has operatives in the FBI?
If the deep state is as big as you think is, and that could be shown to be correct, I would assume that they would have people in the FBI. Do I think James Comey was one of them? No, I do not.
Right. So what did James Comey uncover? And how was he thwarted by being fired?
Well, James Comey, to my knowledge, didn't uncover anything. It was the FBI that would have
So the
uncovered
corrupt
things.
entity that has deep state involvement in it that should not be trusted, that thing should be trusted according to you. Based on the partisan hack jobbery and the paid mouths without minds in the FBI, should they be trusted moving forward?
Yes, I believe they should.
I don't believe that they should. You need to convince me now why I should believe in the FBI when they have done nothing but partisan hackjobbery against a duly elected president and have committed acts of high treason when it comes to illegal spying.
I'm not sure that any of that is true.
I've already put in the links that it is true.
Well, providing an article from a newspaper does not prove your
Yes,
case.
it does.
It merely
If the
proves that
evidence in it. Don't try and dismiss my sources. Read them. They
I'm
have
not
the
I'm
evidence
not
in
I'm
them.
not dismissing your sources. I'm saying that providing a newspaper article is not sufficient justification in order for a person to reverse their position immediately. And I think you would agree to that. I don't think that if I, for instance, provided you with a newspaper article that said something that you would instantaneously, based on the opinion of a journalist, change
It
your
depends
world
who pays
position.
them. Who pays the media? Do they have a vested interest in removing the duly elected president? The media has
Um,
all the right enemies to make all the
I'm
right
not
allies.
sure. I'm not sure that if we're just talking about a media outlet, I would assume that the mainstream media would actually make more money keeping Donald Trump in office because he's so entertaining.
So, do you know what Project Mockingbird of the CIA is?
No, I do not as such. But before we
Infiltrate
move
the
on from
media.
that,
No, this
before
is
we,
very important. The media is bought and paid for by deep state assets. Look into Project Mockingbird. It involves embedding CIA operatives into the media in order to promote control over the population by telling them what to believe. And boy oh boy, has the deep state legacy media gone into overdrive when it comes to removing the duly elected president.
so I tell you what I'm going to do for expediency. This is a uh, uh, of where Donald Trump, according to the Mueller report, um, has committed obstruction with intent and qualifies to next.
Okay, so let me just get this straight. With the Mueller report into the conspiracy of Russian collusion, firstly, the Russian conspiracy is a lie, right? He
So let
did
me
not
make
sway
something.
the election using Russian hackers or bots. That was
So
4chan
let
that
me
did
make
that, sir.
something. Let me make something clear
So a
again.
bogus investigation into Russian collusion to remove a duly elected president happened, and now
The purpose. If I may interrupt for a
of this
moment.
Russian conspiracy is that he obstructed a false bullshit investigation. So the
So if I
false
may,
bullshit investigation should have continued unimpeded, which it did for 3 years. They came up with nothing over 3 years of investigating, nothing, and now all they can get him for is obstructing a bullshit investigation. Weak.
so if I may, in a criminal investigation has no presupposed objective.
Yes, it does.
An
Removing a duly elected
investigation.
president is the obvious goal of the deep state.
So an investigation such as the Mueller report is
It's a
merely
mean.
to
It's a me,
investigate.
It's a means to an end. They investigated for 3 years and got fuck all.
Well, I wouldn't say they got fuck all. Several
What did they
people are
get,
sitting
sir?
in jail.
Did
They
did
convicted several
did the
people.
election in 2016 get rigged by the Russians? Yes or no?
I believe that there was Russian influence in our 2016 election.
No, there wasn't. There was fuck all, sir. It is a hoax designed to fool the ignorant into believing that it had merit. They lied to you. They lied to everyone to remove a duly elected president, and I
I
don't have
don't
to
think it's.
respect the Russian investigation. It was a hoax. It was a witch hunt
Oh,
with
I'm
a
not asking you
lynching.
to. I'm
Excellent.
not asking you to respect anything. However, I would say that we know for a fact that foreign governments attempt to influence the elections of other foreign governments all the time. I do not think it is insane or even unlikely that the second most powerful government on earth would have a vested interest in the outcome of the United States election and would, to the best of its ability, attempt to influence that election to benefit themselves, as the United States does, as England does, as France and Germany does, as Brazil does in South America,
It has
along with
been
Colombia.
categorically proven that they did not influence the election, sir.
I disagree with that 100%.
Well, what evidence is there?
I do not believe
Okay,
that
what's the
the
evidence that they influenced the election?
well the we'll go with the first most obvious bit of evidence, which is computer bots operating or operated by Russian government assets
How many people
populating
did they
false
sway?
information on
How many
Facebook,
people
Google
did they
searches,
sway?
Yahoo, Twitter.
My good man, Democrat thought leaders say that Russia cannot influence that no country can influence the election. Obama said that it is impossible for a foreign entity to influence the election such to change a result.
Well,
Is
that's
Obama
nonsense.
less knowledgeable? Is Obama less knowledgeable or more knowledgeable than you when it comes to the ability of foreign nations to influence the result of an election?
I think that it is common sense. I don't think you need a vast amount of knowledge
I
to
think it's
understand that.
common
May
sense
I
that the
finish?
Russia
May I finish?
conspiracy.
Sir, may I
Go
finish?
ahead.
I think it is common sense to understand that the majority of any electorate in any country are easily manipulated by a variety of things, from television ads about which soaps to buy, to political ads about which candidates to elect, to television ads about which tampons to buy. We are all influenced on a regular basis by what we see on social media and on our televisions and on our radios. So the idea that a person or group of people cannot influence the thinking of another group of people who are generally easily manipulatable is, to me, just common sense. Of course, Russia can influence our election.
Okay,
Of
let me
course,
ask you
the
a question.
Democrats can influence our
How many
election.
times? How many?
Scandinavia could if they chose to.
Very briefly, no, they couldn't. Very briefly, how many times do you have to be lied to before you stop being a sucker for the lies?
I don't know. That's going to depend on the individual person. That's a
Specifically
subjective
Mueller. Let's
question.
say specifically Mueller, who actively was involved in covering up the Epstein case and promoting a Russian hoax conspiracy bullshit that divided America because they wanted to remove and usurp the duly
I
elected
see no
president's
reason to
spot.
believe that Robert Mueller lied about anything. I
He
believe
didn't lie
Robert
about
Mueller is an
anything.
honest and
Mueller
respectable
didn't
man.
lie about anything whatsoever, right?
In his life, I'm sure that Robert Mueller has lied.
You trust
But
Robert
do I
Mueller, sir.
believe? Yes, I do.
You trust the person that gave
Unequivocally.
a light sentence to an international child trafficker and rapist connected with royalty.
Robert Mueller did not sentence Jeffrey
Robert
Epstein to
Mueller was the
anything.
leader of the FBI, and there is no way that he did not know of what he was doing.
Robert Mueller had no capacity to
Robert Mueller
influence
was
one
the
way or
then leader of the
hold on,
FBI
please, hold on,
and
please, hold
definitely
on,
knew
please,
about the Epstein
Ho-
case.
ho-
You don't get to
hold on, please.
dismiss, oh, he didn't know about it.
Sir, I don't, I tend to listen to everything you say, but I would appreciate your sentences not starting in the middle of mine. James Comey. I'm sorry. Jeffrey Epstein was sentenced in a district state court in Florida by
Considering his
the
influence, do you
assistant
think that it was such a
district
small
attorney
affair? Are
for
you
the
trying to
state of
dismiss
Florida.
Jeffrey Epstein's light sentence as a small affair that only the
I am
local...
not dis- I am not dismissing it as a small affair. What
Right,
I
do
am
you think
saying
Mueller
is
knew about Epstein's arrest? The first one.
I'm sure he watched his TV.
Right, so Mueller knew about Epstein's arrest. He was the leader of the FBI. Epstein gets to leave his prison cell after trafficking and raping children on an industrial scale. Mueller knows about this, and you trust this man, do you? I rest my
What do you
case.
mean? What do you mean he leaves his jail cell? Are you talking about when he committed suicide or
No, the
when he
first
was in
time
a state
around.
jail? I'm aware of no link between
I'll
the
post the
Federal
link
Bureau
again.
of.
I'll post the
I'm
link
aware of.
again.
I'm aware of no link between the Federal Bureau of Investigation at the
I'm
time that
posting
Robert
you a
Mueller.
link that demonstrates a cover-up of the FBI in the Epstein case right now. You don't come across this information likely because we each and all have our echo chambers, but let me assure you the FBI actively covered up the Epstein case as a state of national security because British royalty are involved in the international child trafficking and fucking of children.
Okay, so
And you
I
trust this man, do
understand.
you? Mueller knows about Epstein and then lets him off that light, and you trust this man.
So I trust Robert Mueller unequivocally.
Despite the fact that he let off an international child trafficker and rapist.
He did not do anything of the
Yes, he
sort.
did, and I provided the link to show it.
You providing me a link saying that Robert Mueller attempted to cover up the Epstein case bears no burden on, and let me explain
Yes, it
why
does
I
bear
say this.
burden on trust.
Again, I would ask that your sentences not start in the middle of mine. The state of Florida is an independent state inside the United States with its own State Bureau of
Right,
Investigation and
so
its
your rebuttal
own
to this is to
judicial
dismiss it.
branch. My rebuttal to this is that if there is any cover up that exists, it would occur in the state of Florida. It would not rise to the
Right,
level of
so
the
the
Federal
scale of
Bureau
the
of
cover-up is
Investigation.
limited, is what you're
If
saying.
the if there was a cover-up, the cover-up would have occurred between the Florida Assistant District Attorney who wrote the plea
Right,
for Jeffrey
right,
Epstein,
I see.
not the Federal
This is
Bureau of
your retort
Investigation.
that, Mueller didn't know about it, had no idea about Epstein trafficking and raping children on an industrial scale, and
Well, no, I
letting him
didn't
off
say
is
that.
Guy's
I
fault.
said, no, I didn't say that. I'm sure that Robert Mueller
Okay,
watched his
let me
TV.
try and bridge this for you, sir. Do you trust a man who was provably involved in the light sentence of Epstein? As the
Do I
leader of the
trust
FBI, for national security purposes, did he cover up for
the
Epstein, yes or no?
The FBI played no part in the sentencing
Yes,
of
it
Jeffrey
did.
Epstein in
Okay,
Florida.
shall we read this article, sir, for the purpose of the audience's education?
If you may.
Certainly, give me a moment.
By the way, as far as I understand it, the only evidence that you have, since I can't read your article, I Googled some articles for myself, and as far as I know, this entire theory rests on an ex-cop in Florida who claims to have incriminating evidence of this cover-up, but has yet not released any such evidence. So I cannot base any conclusion on the musings of an ex-cop who claims to have evidence that no one has seen or has access to over the lifetime
Are you
career
telling me that
of Robert
Epstein didn't
Mueller.
have videos?
I'm sure Epstein did have videos,
Right.
but this entire
So now that
theory
we've established
rests.
that these videos exist, is it impossible that a police officer has these Epstein videos? And what is the probability that Epstein videos A exist and B are known about?
Is it plausible to assume that Jeffrey Epstein videotaped his exploits? Yeah, that's not outside of the realm of possibility. Is it possible that a police officer, during the course of a criminal investigation into this, took some of those videos? Yes, that's not outside the realm of possibility. Your entire argument rests on the ex-Florida cop named John Mark Duggan, who claims to have these things, but as yet has released not a single one
Right.
to the
So
public.
you're
So,
using the
as
debating
a
tactic of
person,
deconstruction and dismissal, right?
well, I'm not dismissing this. What I'm saying is, as a person,
You are.
I don't base my opinion. I try at least not to base my opinion on emotion. I try to base my opinion on
No, you
facts.
don't.
Now,
No, you don't.
if it is the
Okay,
case,
carry on.
If it is the case that John Mark Duggan does in fact have videos that prove a cover-up between the state government of Florida, the United Kingdom, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, I will be happy to read. I will not watch it, but I will be happy to read any of that evidence. But as of now, not I, nor you, nor any one of your listeners listening, nor anyone in this channel, nor anyone has access to this information. So at this point, it is all merely assumption on both our
Deconstruction and
parts.
dismissal is a dogshit argument, sir. Epstein was let off the hook, Mueller knew about it, and you trust a man who let another man off the hook who is an industrial-scale child trafficker and rapist.
Okay, let me go about this a
Your
different way.
trust attribution is fucked.
Let me go about this a different way. Do you have any evidence that you can present to me other than the fact that John Mark Duggan claims to have video evidence of this link? Do you have any other evidence besides that single claim by an ex-Florida cop?
Yes, I have the dead bodies and the skeletons found on Epstein's island. I also have his little black book.
Well,
And
dead
knowing
bodies
the scale of
prove nothing.
Have you read the little black book, by the way?
Well, first of all, let's go over what you first said. I don't know what the little black book is.
When I say industrial scale, child trafficking and child rape, entrapment and blackmail schemes, have you read the little black book, sir?
If the little black book is what I think it is, I believe you are referring to some form of dossier that has specific names on it that include Prince Andrew, the royal family of the United Kingdom, when this person visited Jeffrey Epstein's island. However, while I would lend credence to the idea that a person visiting Jeffrey Epstein's island only has one purpose in mind, that does not prove that the FBI covered up anything. It merely proves that Prince Andrew is a pedophile, and that is something that the United Kingdom should deal with on their own.
So you don't believe that anyone who was on the little black book was trafficking, raping, and murdering children? There are
I did not say that. Wait a second. I can't stand that. No, I can't stand for that. That is entirely and absolutely unequivocally not what I said. I specifically said that anybody on that list, if it can be shown that they went to that island, I would lend credence to the idea that they were there to engage in sex with minors.
Right. And kill them.
Now, I kill them. I don't know. I don't know if if they were.
If the article about the skeletons in the coastline.
I don't want to read anything about dead bodies. I'll take you. I will take your word that there were dead bodies on the island.
Children. And the person who let him off the hook was Mueller, because he was the leader of the FBI at the time, and you trust a man who let off the hook
again, that's a non sequitur.
Trafficker and rapist. No, I'm going to hammer this point home repeatedly, sir, until you can overcome it, methinks. You trust a man, Mueller, who let off the hook an industrial-scale child trafficker and rapist and child murderer because you hate Orange Man bad.
No, sir. Using highly motivated language in order to prove a point to me does not work. It may work with your audience or other people, but as a person who values critical thinking, it does not work with me.
Critical thinking and a representation of the real world in reality, sir. Mueller knew about Epstein. Mueller let him off the hook. Mueller now is trying to impeach the president with Russian hoax bullshit.
Okay, let me ask you a question.
Is a deep state asset, and let me finish briefly. Your trust attribution to a man who helped another man avoid jail and give him a luxurious time in jail. Mueller actively permitted, under the Obama administration, Epstein to be able to walk his prison to leave the prison. And what, 9 months was it? 11 months? For industrial scale child trafficking, child rape, and child murder. And you trust the man who lets off Epstein. Your trust attribution
first of all,
Prove me wrong.
First of all, we need to point out a couple things, okay? Because these things are going to be very important. Now, whether or not you understand the way the United States judicial system works, and if we need to
Listen, you're
explain
not
that,
going to
sir,
do a
please,
reduction
sir,
ad absurdum
sir,
for what I
if
just
I
said.
may,
In
if
the
I may,
real
sir,
world, he was let
sir,
off.
if I may, the FBI, in its fashion as a non-deliberative body, possesses no capacity to interfere with the application of justice in a state district court whatsoever. This is the way that the United States justice system works. At best, what you can say is that Robert Mueller chose not to raise Jeffrey Epstein's crime to the level of a federal investigation. However, Robert Mueller, in his capacity as the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, possessed no capacity to determine otherwise, allow Jeffrey Epstein to walk free, go to jail, eat a sandwich, or any other act. The only person in this trial that could convict, determine sentencing, and create the opportunity to have that sentence initiated was the judge of the district court and the attorney general, or the district attorney of that district in Florida.
Right. So dismissal and deconstruction. Dog shit
I
arguments, as I will repeat, ad infinitum, repeatedly as you try to dismiss this. Again, Mueller knew that Epstein was trafficking, raping, and murdering children on an industrial scale. What did he do about it? He let him walk. And you trust the man who lets an industrial scale child trafficker, rapist, and murderer off the hook. That man deserves to be trustworthy, you say, with confidence and courage. And I'm telling you that that's dogshit garbage, and that your estimation of trust towards Mueller is very, very warped, and not based on
well,
reality. In the real world, Mueller let an industrial scale trafficker, rapist, and murderer of children get away with it. And by the way, Epstein, when he was caught the second time, he had video footage and pictures of other children he was molesting at the time. So under Mueller's great FBI leadership, this Epstein bloke, he gets left off the hook. And you want me to trust this, and now you try to dismiss it as Mueller could do nothing? Bullshit. Bullshit, sir.
You're accusing me of dismissing your arguments, and yet I have agreed to many things that you have
Oh,
stated
don't worry.
inside your
The audience will
arguments.
decide for themselves if
Um,
you trust Mueller, who lets off
however,
the hook a child trafficker,
however, I
rapist, and
will point
murderer.
out that when you accuse me of dismissing your arguments, I have not dismissed your arguments. I have listened to your arguments and I have analyzed them. I have
No, you have not
agreed.
acknowledged what I've said, sir.
First let me make this point. I believe that Jeffrey Epstein was guilty of very horrific things. I believe Jeffrey Epstein's sentencing in Florida was a gross miscarriage of justice. I believe that there were powerful people that deserved to be held accountable for their actions on
But there
Jeffrey
weren't big
Epstein's
players letting him off
island.
the hook.
However, you have not presented any evidence that a rational person could use to conclude that there was a cover-up by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, since the United States government does not allow the Federal Bureau of Investigation to interfere in the investigations of a state government unless the state government requests that assistance. Since the state of Florida did not request the investigation power of the FBI in the initial conviction of Jeffrey Epstein, I, as a person who lives in America and understands how the American justice system works, can make the obvious conclusion that Robert Mueller had absolutely nothing to do with a cover-up of
Except
the
for the
crimes
fact
of
that he
Jeffrey
knew
Epstein.
about it. If he knows about it and doesn't push the case forward to have more charges and lets it be only one charge and him to get off scot-free, he knew about it and he let him off. Do you deny this?
I would say that if Robert Mueller had evidence of a federal
They have the
crime and
black
chose
book,
not to
sir.
investigate it,
Bill Clinton was
then
fucking children and killing them on
if
the island, sir.
if
And he knew
Robert
about it.
Mueller,
It's a common secret that
if
entrapment and
if
blackmail rings exist, and Epstein was running one. Okay? It's
if
bigger than a single charge at the federal level. Epstein was an international, industrial scale trafficker, rapist, and murderer of children. Bill Clinton was raping, murdering, and killing children on the island, and it doesn't go beyond the local charge level. And you're telling me that Mueller did not know or not partake in a cover-up of an industrial scale, international trafficking, raping, and murdering for
so
blackmail and
again,
entrapment.
if it is the
You have
case,
not
right?
understood
See,
the scale of
sir,
this.
sir, sir, if it is the case that the FBI was aware of a federal crime and chose, in its fashion as a non-deliberative body, not to investigate said crime, then I could grant credence to your idea that the FBI covered something up. However, as is often the case in the American judicial system, the
So you're
FBI
trying to dismiss
will,
this as the judicial system fucked up, and that's all, nothing more than that.
yes.
And that is the point at which this debate will end.
Well, you had several